Saturday night. Where were you? Were you watching Britain's Got Talent? Because it was incredible. And 11-year-old Olly Pearson booked his place in the grand final.
11-year-old Olly Pearson walked onto the Britain's Got Talent stage and did something no contestant ever had. Overnight, he became the most talked-about act in years. But what happened immediately after the final episode will leave you in shock. Olly's name got caught in a controversy so awful that he seemed to disappear from the spotlight overnight. Now, we finally know the truth about what happened after Britain's Got Talent, and it's extremely messy. The rise of Olly Pearson. At some point, it felt like the world would never forget the name Olly Pearson. When he first appeared on Britain's Got Talent, his talent looked too big to ignore, and everyone was sure they were watching the start of a global star. He was expected to dominate the industry, yet the spotlight faded almost as soon as the finale aired. Olly's rise to fame began during one of the most unusual periods, the 2020 lockdown. Olly was only 7 years old, and like many kids at the time, he was stuck at home with very little to do. One evening, during a socially distanced street gathering, he heard a neighbor playing the guitar. And right at that moment, something clicked. He became fascinated with the sound, and almost immediately, he wanted to try it himself. The first person to help him was his grandfather, Lee Hughes. He was not a professional teacher, but he knew his way around a guitar and was happy to show his grandson the basics. Because of the lockdown, the lessons started over Zoom, with the two of them sitting in different rooms, trying to make the best of a strange situation. When restrictions finally eased, the lessons were held in person, and that was when people around them began noticing Olly's talent. Olly's family later revealed that he did not treat the guitar like a hobby. Instead, he practiced constantly. Some weeks, he spent up to 7 hours playing with his grandfather, going over the same riffs again and again until he got them right. What surprised Lee Hughes the most was how fast he learned. Before long, the lessons stopped feeling like lessons at all. Olly started figuring out techniques on his own, sometimes even showing his grandfather new ways to play things he had just learned online. The first time the wider public saw what he could do came through a video filmed in Chester. In the clip, Olly played the classic instrumental Apache, standing in the street with a confidence that looked far beyond his age. Someone uploaded the video to YouTube, and within days, it started spreading. Views climbed into the millions, then past 10 million, and eventually over 15 million people had watched a boy who was barely 9 years old playing like someone twice his age. That was the moment many people first realized he was not just another kid who had trouble learning guitar. He was something rare. By the time he walked onto the Britain's Got Talent stage in March 2025, he was 11 years old, but he carried himself like he had done it 100 times before. He came out wearing a backwards cap, holding a custom Patrick James Eggle guitar with a wireless system that let him move freely across the stage. Even before he played a note, the setup told the judges this was not going to be a normal performance. The first song he chose was Highway to Hell by AC/DC, and within seconds, the audience knew they were witnessing greatness. He duck-walked across the stage during the solo, moving like he had grown up in front of arena crowds instead of practicing in his grandfather's house. Instead of stopping there, he kept going and followed up with Jump by Van Halen, and then Don't Stop Me Now by Queen. The energy never dropped, and before the performance had even finished, the judges were already on their feet. Amanda Holden hit the golden buzzer, sending him straight to the semifinals, and her reaction said everything people at home were thinking. She called him a star the moment the confetti started falling, and the audience couldn't get enough.
Oh my God, Olly, I mean literally a star is born.
When the semifinal arrived in May 2025, the pressure was even higher, but the performance was bigger too. Olly came back with another fast-paced medley, moving across the stage with the same wireless setup, switching between Thunderstruck, Sweet Child O' Mine, and Livin' on a Prayer without losing control for a second. The crowd reacted before the judges even spoke, and Simon Cowell stood up before giving his comments, something he rarely does. Then something happened that had never happened before in the history of Britain's Got Talent. Simon pressed the golden buzzer again, sending Olly straight to the final and making him the first act ever to receive 2 golden buzzers in the same season. At that point, it looked almost certain he was going to win the show. In the weeks leading up to the final, the routine stayed the same. He practiced every day, usually 2 or 3 hours at a time. Not because anyone told him to, but because he wanted to. His parents said they never had to remind him. His father later said they were proud of the time and effort he put into playing, and his grandfather joked that he had not really taught him anything at all. He had only opened the door and let the talent come out. The final on May 31st, 2025, was supposed to be the biggest moment of his life, but even that night did not go smoothly. Olly was scheduled as the 11th act, and just before he was due to go on, the show had to stop. The production team was not ready for his staging setup, and the delay played out live on television. The hosts had to fill time while the crew rushed to prepare the stage, joking with the audience while Olly waited backstage, knowing millions of people were watching. When he finally performed, the scale was bigger than anything he had done before. He played Live and Let Die and Bohemian Rhapsody, with 2 live drummers behind him, turning the stage into something closer to a rock concert than a talent show. The crowd stood, the judges applauded, and for a moment, it looked like the win was guaranteed. But when the votes were announced, he finished in 4th place. The winner was magician Harry Moulding, and while Olly still received a standing ovation, the result surprised a lot of people who thought the show had already chosen its star. But the real surprise came after the finale ended. Instead of the success everyone expected, his name suddenly became part of a debate that nobody saw coming. Some viewers questioned the results. Others accused the show of pushing him too hard. And for the first time since his audition, the attention around Olly Pearson was not just about his talent. The controversy that followed his Britain's Got Talent run. The moment Olly Pearson received his 2nd golden buzzer, the reaction inside the theater sounded like pure excitement. The audience stood up, the judges were smiling, and for a few seconds, it felt like the show had just created one of its biggest stars. But almost as soon as the episode finished airing, the conversation online started to shift. Instead of talking only about his performance, viewers began arguing about the rules, the format, and whether the show had changed things in a way that gave him an advantage. Part of the problem started with a change that had been announced before the semi-finals even began. For the 2025 season, ITV introduced a new rule, allowing 1 golden buzzer during each semi-final. In previous years, the golden buzzer had only been used during the auditions, so once the live shows started, the contestants had to rely entirely on the public vote. This time, the format was different, and although the rule applied to every semifinal, the first time it was actually used ended up causing the biggest reaction. Simon Cowell pressed the semifinal golden buzzer for Olly Pearson, sending him straight through to the final without having to depend on the vote. On paper, the rule had been explained clearly, but once people saw how it played out, many felt the change looked a little too strange. Because the golden buzzer could only be used once per semi-final, some viewers immediately pointed out that later acts would not have the same chance that Olly had just received. The tension inside the theater that night showed that the audience was already thinking about it. During the same semi-final, another act called Cheer Remains finished their performance to loud cheers, and the crowd began chanting for Simon to press the golden buzzer again.
Working in an office, like in a really boring office, and then you come out and do that.
But when it did not happen, the reaction in the studio turned uncomfortable. Later, when the results were announced, the group came 3rd in the public vote and missed the final, which immediately drew loud boos from the studio audience. But it didn't end there. The crowd reacted the same way when other acts they found equally impressive were ranked lower. The atmosphere in the studio made it clear that the audience was uncomfortable with the new Golden Buzzer format. Once the episode aired, the reaction online was even stronger. Within hours, people began talking about the show across social media platforms, especially on X. Many viewers accused the show of being biased, and some even suggested that the outcome of the show may have been decided in advance. They also claimed the format change had been designed in a way that made it easier for Olly to reach the final. Others pointed out that no contestant in the history of Britain's Got Talent had ever received 2 golden buzzers in the same season, and that alone made the moment feel unusual to them. Some of the criticism was aimed directly at Simon Cowell. Because he had pressed the buzzer himself, people accused him of showing favoritism, especially toward younger performers. It was not the first time the show had been accused of pushing certain acts, but the timing of the rule change made the argument louder than usual. Instead of celebrating the performance, the discussion turned into a debate about whether the competition had been fair in the first place. The story quickly moved from social media to the tabloids. Newspapers began running headlines about Olly Pearson being a possible fix. Soon, the media coverage focused less on his talent and more on the controversy surrounding his golden buzzers. Headlines questioned why the rule had been changed that season, and some even quoted anonymous production sources, suggesting the decision had created tension behind the scenes. The way the stories were written made the situation sound bigger than it probably was, and it was enough to keep the argument going for days. At the same time, there were just as many people defending the show. ITV released a statement explaining that format changes happen almost every season, and that the semi-final Golden Buzzer had been announced before the live shows began. According to the producers, the rule applied equally to every act, and the judges were free to use it however they wanted. Simon Cowell did not apologize for pressing the buzzer, and during the show, he made it clear he believed Olly's performance deserved it. Olly's family stayed completely silent about the accusations. They did not respond to the comments online, and they did not try to argue with the headlines. Supporters of the young guitarist pointed out that none of the controversy changed the fact that his performances had impressed both the judges and the audience. They also reminded people that every act still had the chance to reach the final through the public vote, and that format changes had happened in other seasons without causing the same reaction. Even after the finale aired, the debate did not disappear. Some viewers argued that finishing fourth showed the public had pushed back after the semi-final controversy. Others said the argument itself distracted from how well he actually played. Instead of being remembered only for his performances, his run on Britain's Got Talent became one of the most talked about and most debated parts of the entire 2025 season. After the show ended, the conversation stopped being about golden buzzers and rule changes. The attention turned to something else entirely. An 11-year-old had just become one of the most talked about contestants in the country overnight, and that kind of spotlight does not disappear when the cameras turn off. What followed next showed that the hardest part of Olly Pearson's story was never the competition itself, but everything that came after it. How fame affected Olly Pearson. When Britain's Got Talent ended, the attention around Olly Pearson did not disappear the way it does for most contestants. In fact, in the weeks after the final, the attention only seemed to grow. Instead of being known as the young guitarist from the auditions, he became something bigger, almost overnight. In his hometown, in his school, and across North Wales, people started treating him like a celebrity. And for an 11-year-old, that kind of sudden recognition can change everyday life very quickly. Back at Abermordw Community Primary School in Wrexham.
Hello, Croeso. Welcome to Abermordw School.
The response was overwhelming. The school posted a message on its social media saying it was immensely proud of him and everything he had achieved on Britain's Got Talent. Not long after the final aired, the staff held a school assembly in his honor. Teachers spoke about his hard work, and students gathered to celebrate someone they had been watching on television just days earlier. For the younger pupils, the excitement turned into imitation. Some reportedly came to school wearing backwards caps, like the one he wore on stage, copying the look they had seen during his performances. The reaction did not stay inside the school. Wrexham Council shared the school's post online and added their own congratulations, turning the moment into something the whole area could take pride in. Local officials mentioned his name during meetings, and community pages filled with messages saying he had done the town proud. For a town like Wrexham, having someone from the area reach the final of Britain's Got Talent felt like a big moment, and people talked about it as if one of their own had gone out and represented them on a national stage. Nearby towns joined in as well. In Chester, where the video of him playing Apache had first gone viral years earlier, residents also claimed him as part of their local success story. Some neighbors remembered seeing him perform outside during the lockdown, long before the television cameras arrived. Those small street performances suddenly became part of the story people told when they talked about how far he had come. Local businesses added to the celebration. Shop windows displayed handwritten signs congratulating him, and newspapers ran front-page stories about his result in the final. The media outlets in Wrexham covered his fourth-place finish as if it were a major local event, focusing on the pride people felt rather than the controversy that had surrounded the semi-final. The media attention did not stop with local coverage. Within days, Olly was appearing on television and radio, talking about his experience on the show. He appeared on the Britain's Got Talent spin-off program, where he was interviewed on what it felt like to stand on stage, how he practiced, and how much his grandfather had actually helped him learn.
It was so good. Olly joins me right now alongside his dad Simon and grandfather Lee. So lovely to have you all on the show.
The segment was short, only a few minutes, but it showed how quickly the show had turned him into someone people wanted to hear from. Radio stations called next, BBC. Radio Wales spoke to him over the phone, and another interview followed on BBC Radio Manchester. Local television crews came to the family home for doorstep interviews, asking the same questions viewers everywhere wanted answers to. What was it like meeting the judges? What did he think about the final? What was he going to do next? Newspapers in North Wales printed features with quotes from his parents, talking about how proud they were and how surprised they were by how fast everything had happened. Even the tabloids, which had initially focused on the controversy during the semi-final, changed their tone after the show ended. The headlines shifted from arguments about the show's rules to praising the young guitarist from Wrexham who had captured the audience's attention. Online, the reaction was even faster. Within days of the finale, his social media numbers jumped sharply. Accounts connected to his family gained tens of thousands of followers almost overnight. Clips of his performances spread across TikTok, with millions of views appearing in the first day alone. Facebook groups in the local area shared photos from the school assembly and messages of support, turning his success into something people felt part of. Even with all that attention, there was one detail that showed how young Olly Pearson still was. Even with all the exposure, he did not run his own accounts. Every post came from his family, and most of them were simple thank you messages to the people who had supported him. The people around him seemed careful not to let the spotlight get out of control. Still, the pressure that comes with that kind of fame does not disappear just because someone is young. Going from playing guitar at home to performing in front of millions means life cannot stay exactly the same. School, friends, practice, and normal routines all have to fit around interviews, appearances, and expectations from people who suddenly want to know what you will do next. Even for adults, that kind of attention can be difficult, and for a child, it can feel even bigger. That was the part many viewers started wondering about after the show ended. Not whether he was talented and not whether he deserved the golden buzzers, but what happens after the cameras stop following you every week. Because Britain's Got Talent can make someone famous very quickly, but it does not always show what comes next. In the months after the final, the excitement slowly became quieter. The interviews stopped, the headlines moved on, and the question people began asking was no longer about the controversy or the performances. It was about where Olly Pearson went after all of it, and what he was actually doing once the spotlight from Britain's Got Talent was no longer on him. Where is Olly Pearson now? After the noise around Britain's Got Talent started to fade, many people assumed Olly Pearson had simply gone back to normal life. That often happens with young contestants. They appear on television, everyone talks about them for a few weeks, and then the spotlight moves on to someone else. But in Olly's case, the story did not end with the finale. While the headlines became quieter, his career actually started moving in a different direction that had less to do with television and more to do with the music world itself. One of the biggest signs of that came when he was selected for the Gibson Generation Group, often called G3, Class of 2027. The program is run by Gibson, one of the most famous guitar companies in the world, and it is designed to find young musicians who show real long-term potential. It is not a competition or a talent show. It is a 2-year artist development program where a small group of players from different countries are chosen to work directly with professionals in the industry. Only a handful of musicians are picked every 2 years, and the class of 2027 included players from all over the world. Olly represented the United Kingdom, alongside artists from the United States, Brazil, Turkey, China, Nashville, Miami, Seattle, and California. Being part of that group meant he was no longer just known as the boy from Britain's Got Talent. He was being treated as a serious young guitarist with the potential to build a real career. The program itself gives artists access to things most musicians do not get until much later. Members receive one-on-one support from Gibson's artist relations team, instrument loans, coaching sessions, and chances to perform at festivals and music events alongside well-known players. They also work with mentors, including professional guitarists, who guide them through songwriting, recording, and building a career in the industry. Instead of just playing for an audience, the focus is on learning how to stay in the business for years. Gibson's global director of cultural influence explained that the reason the group is kept small is so the company can build real relationships with each artist. The goal is not just to help them for a short time, but to support them as their careers grow. Mentors involved in the program have said the same thing, describing the group as a place where young musicians can develop without the pressure that comes from television competitions. Olly and his family spoke about the experience in a way that showed how seriously they were taking it. Olly himself said he had always loved Gibson guitars, and being invited into the program felt like an honor. He talked about the mentoring as something that helped him learn from people who had real experience in the industry, and he described the group as a family where everyone supports each other. For someone his age, that kind of environment can make a big difference, especially because it gives him a path forward that does not depend only on fame from one show. His involvement with the program also led to live appearances that showed he was still performing regularly. In February 2026, he played at the Gibson Garage Fest in London, part of a 2-week celebration of music and guitar culture. The event took place at the Gibson Garage, the company's first store outside the United States, and featured artist showcases, exhibitions, and live performances. Olly played on the Gibson stage and even jammed with other musicians during the show, something that made it clear he was still comfortable performing in front of a crowd. At the same time, he began picking up equipment endorsements, another sign that the industry was taking him seriously. Several companies connected to guitars and professional audio gear started working with him, including Fairclough Guitars, Scan Pro Audio, Patrick James Eggle handmade UK guitars, and Scott Dixon flight cases. Some of those endorsements had already started before Britain's Got Talent, but after the show, they became more visible. For a musician his age, having multiple gear companies supporting him is unusual, especially because those deals are usually given to players who are already working professionally. These endorsements also gave him the opportunity to appear at guitar shows and music events where he demonstrated equipment live, something that puts him in front of audiences very different from television viewers. Instead of performing for only judges, he was playing for musicians, collectors, and fans who understand the instrument itself. These experiences have shaped Olly's career in a way Britain's Got Talent alone could not do. Olly has also begun performing with other artists, sometimes as a guest, sometimes as part of festival lineups. He has appeared with tribute bands, shared the stage with rock musicians, and even played at large events connected to classic rock festivals. One of the most talked-about appearances came when he was scheduled to perform at Bonfest, an AC/DC tribute festival, alongside former AC/DC drummer Chris Slade. Moments like that showed how much his style had stayed connected to the kind of music he played on Britain's Got Talent. But that's not all. Olly also appeared at DivaFest in Cheshire not long after the show, and he kept doing smaller live shows across the UK, including guitar conventions and local events. These are not the kind of performances that make national headlines, but they are opportunities to show the world that he has not stopped playing, and that the people who follow guitar music are still paying attention to him. Surprisingly, Olly has also received recognition from outside the music world. After his Britain's Got Talent run, he was nominated for Best Performance in a reality TV show at the National Reality TV Awards. The nomination surprised him, and he said he could not believe his audition had reached that many people. His parents spoke about how hard he worked, not just on playing but also on stage presence, and how proud they were of the reaction he received from the audience during the show. For them, the nomination felt like proof that the effort he put in had been noticed. One of the moments that spread online the fastest came from a flash mob performance in Paris. Olly played lead guitar during a public performance of Bohemian Rhapsody, surprising people in the street immediately as the music started. The whole thing was organized by a pianist named Julian Cohen, who set up a piano in the middle of a busy intersection and brought together 30 musicians to pull it off. The video spread across social media, collecting huge numbers of views and bringing his name back into the conversation again. Fans of Queen and rock music shared the clip widely, and the performance showed that his appeal was not limited to television viewers. He could still go viral simply by playing the guitar in front of a crowd. Looking at everything he has done since the show, the pattern is clear. Instead of trying to stay famous through television, Olly has been building a career step by step, working with musicians, companies, and events that exist outside the world of talent shows. For some viewers, that makes it seem like he disappeared, because he is not on TV every week. But in reality, he has been doing the kind of work that usually happens behind the scenes before a musician becomes well known again. After Britain's Got Talent, everyone expected Olly to be the show's next breakout star, dominating the charts and the headlines almost overnight. But his path did not move that way. Instead of rushing into the spotlight, his career has grown more quietly, built around live performances, mentorship programs, and the kind of work most young musicians do long before the public notices. Which is why the real question people keep asking now is not what happened to Olly Pearson, but what's up next for him. But what do you think? Which artist would you like to see Olly Pearson collaborate with next? Drop your answers in the comment section below. Don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.